So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a grab strap for your English saddle. So step 1, you want to be sure to have leather that's already stained in a color that you like, and also is in some sort of strip like this. You also want to be sure that it's good enough leather to be able to carry a saddle, since it's going to be carrying some weight whenever you pick up your saddle. So then after you picked out what leather you want, then you're gonna start by thinning your leather. I like to use this tool here, which is a thinning knife, and don't touch the blade. I've done it before. It's sharp. So once you figure out how to use it, then it's pretty easy. So if you've been working with leather long enough, you'd already know how to thin it. But while you're thinning your leather, you want to be sure that you don't thin it too much. Otherwise, your leather will get too thin and it'll rip. So really, you just want it to be thin enough, but not too thick either. And you don't want to thin this side, the leather-looking side. If yours has suede on the other side, then you would thin that side. You would need 2 of these clamp thingies, and I get mine off of leashes that you can easily get at the Dollar Tree or dollar store. So once you gather up this, then you're going to make sure that you have all the tools, like this. This is a tool that you use to poke holes inside of leather, and I'm not actually sure how many millimeters this one is, but you want to make sure that the holes are really small. And you're going to take your leather that you already thinned and go over to your saddle. Mine already has a grab strap. This is my first grab strap that I made. And then this is just a grab strap that I just tied onto it, but I wanted to get a nicer one. So then these are called the D-rings, and that's where they're located on the saddle. So you're going to kind of eye measure it. You're just going to get your leather and then maybe put it off a couple, maybe 2 inches, maybe just 1. Yeah, about 1 inch, 1.5, and like away after that D-ring, and then on both sides. And it should be about that on your saddle, like that, kind of sticking out a little bit. And if you have too much left over, then you would just kind of trim that to make it where you only have about 1 inch on each side. So I would just make it easier for myself and just pull it to one end where I just only have to cut one end. And for this particular case, I would cut it about right here. So after trimming the leather, I have it on about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 on each side. Anyways, about that much. And then you would take it off your saddle. And then I like to use a brick that I just have laying around outside, actually. So you use like a harder brick to be able to like really do anything with the leather when it comes to engraving or poking holes in it. And also good for whenever you thin your leather because it's really solid. So then what you're going to do is with this clamp, you're going to have 2 of them, and you'll start with one side at a time, and then it should be about that much, maybe a bit more on each side, like that, and then you're going to fold it over, and I'm doing this with one hand, so that's why it's really difficult for me. So then it should look something like that, and you would mark that spot. So then where it bent, like where you had it bend after like maybe 1 inch and a little bit extra, would be right there. So then you would start by lining up the tool that you used to poke holes, and that is going to take some other measuring. So then you're just gonna fold it over again. Just once you know where you want your holes to be, you're gonna start by lining up your tool to poke the holes in the leather, and then you would use a hammer to hammer it in, and then you'd probably tap the hammer on the back of this about 6 to 10 times. So then after you poke your first hole inside of the leather, you're just gonna do that again. And it should probably be something like that. And you would figure out where your hole is and then mark it to the other side, just kind of with your fingers, and then that's where you're gonna poke the other hole. After you do that, you want to make sure that you line up those holes that you poked into the leather and plan your next ones. And you want it to be not very far away from the other hole, since these holes you're going to be making for whenever you sew it together. So you probably make it about that far from the other one. So then you pretty much do the same thing that you did with the first one, like all the way until it gets to the end, from where you bent it all the way to the end of the shortest piece. So then it should look something like this. And of course, you need to do the exact same thing to the other side. So then once you have it done on both sides, then you want to make sure that everything's the right measurement again. So you're going to just do a quick check. And once you're done with that, it's going to be time to do the final steps. So then you'll thread your needle with some thread. I would prefer thicker thread for sure, much thicker thread. I don't have very good thread, but if you have thicker thread than just this, then be sure to use that. And then for it to go inside of your holes. You don't want your thread to be thicker than the holes. I don't know if they make thread that thick. But anyways, you want a good needle that's not going to just break, and it's also amazing to have a giant eye. So then you're going to get those clamps things that you got off your dog leash, and you're going to do the same thing on each side. So I'm really only going to have to show you how to do it on one side. So like we showed earlier, is you would put this part where you made that crease in your leather. So that's where it's going to be. So then once it is something like this, with your clamp right there, it's really hard to record with one hand. And then the other hand will do all the work. So you're going to line up your holes that you made in the leather and try to get them nice and lined up, and then you're gonna sew. And then once you sew each side, that side I just kind of wrapped. But once you sew each side, then you just simply put it on your saddle. So that's the end of this tutorial, and be sure to follow and like. And a thing that I do like to do, just as a tip, is I add some extra reinforcement where I sewed with some strong super glue. That's the end of this video.